Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Magic with Zuby. My name is Zuby, and if you're brand new to this show, the show is all about a little well-known card game called Magic the Gathering. So in today's episode, we brought on none other than Hobbes from the Goblin Lore Podcast, and we talked a lot about mental health and a little bit of magic there, not too much, and then a bunch of Lord of the Rings as well too. Before we get into that, let me get some announcements out of the way. If you want to help support the show, you can help support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/magicwithzuby. And you can find me on Twitter at magicwithzuby, on Instagram at magic_with_Zuby, on TikTok at mtgzuby, and you can reach out to me at mtgzuby@gmail.com. And we've got one quick little commercial out of the way for Magic for Normies, and we're also sponsored by cardsphere.com, the best place to buy and sell your Magic singles and sealed product. And yeah, so without further ado, here is Hobbes of Goblin Lore Podcast. Or I should point here. Okay, yeah, there you go.
And that is how you beat the latest standard meta with Abzan.
Ugh, it feels like there's no Magic content out there for someone like me. Someone who doesn't want to be competitive. Someone who is...
Who is a normie?
Yeah, exactly! A normie!
Well, have I got the show for you, the all-new Magic for Normies show.
Hi, I'm Pixie.
And I'm Zuby.
Together, we host the all-new
Magic for Normies.
It is the Magic the Gathering show for all your normie needs. We don't care what deck got into the top 8 or what deck is winning. We care about having fun playing Magic.
That's right, Pixie. You can watch us on Pixie's Twitch channel at twitch.tv/PixieKittenPlays and catch the VOD on our YouTube channel, Pixie Kitten Plays. If audio is your thing, you can find episodes on the Magic with Zuby RSS feed.
Magic for Normies.
All right, hey everybody, Zuby here, and I have with me the awesome Hobbes of the Goblin Lore Podcast. I'm glad we can finally do this. This is our third time trying to do it. The first time was, I can't remember, I think I had some work thing to do, I think. Second time...
No, you had like a family...
Oh, that's right, yeah. Oh my god, I feel terrible because it was my wife's grandfather passed away. That's right.
Yep.
That's right. And then second time, just a casual insurrection of America, and just a small little topple of American democracy.
And the reschedule being for today, and I think, at least on my end, no thought whatsoever that it was Inauguration Day. We just flat out no thought about that, and then us talking yesterday, like, hey, we're still recording.
Yeah.
As long as there's an America.
Yeah. As long as we still have a country. And, I know the, so as of this recording, because this isn't going to come out until the next week, which is the end of January. But as of the recording, we're recording on January 20th. And this was Inauguration Day where Joe Biden got sworn in and all that. And minus all the military presence and all that, which is really unprecedented but completely understandable because just casual insurrection,
A little light.
Yeah, just a little light treason. But it was like I loved the speeches and all that stuff. And Amanda, is it Groman or Gorman? Gorman, her poem was awesome.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
But overall, it was relatively, I have to say, boring. And that's a good thing.
Yeah. I think both you and I said, before yesterday when we were talking, it was we want this to just be a completely unmemorable event.
And I hopefully
by and large, the event itself.
Yes.
We're at least recording tonight.
Yes. So you do the Goblin Lore Podcast, and I guess as of this recording, have you hit 100 episodes yet, or did you just release? I can't remember because I know you said something about it.
Yeah. So by the time this is out, our 100th episode will be out.
Okay.
Right after I get off of this today, I'm putting the final touches on and uploading.
Nice.
So, 100 episodes. it is mind blowing to me. Like, I never in a million years would think that I would be doing a podcast and that we'd be on episode 100.
Oh,
I mean,
dude, totally know where you're coming from, man. It's like, I mean, did you ever see yourself even going past like even 6 months of doing this, or?
No. And funny enough, just past the 6-month mark was actually when my daughter was born, and you know, I legitimately thought that there was a good chance that the cast would end. You know, at that point we were reporting there was 3 of us on the show.
Yeah.
We've lost a host during this time. We've like my child was born, so there's just been like all of this stuff. And no, at that point I was like, you know, this has been a great ride. This has been a very good thing that I enjoy. I really want to do it, but like I couldn't record. Like there was 2 or 3 months getting used to a tiny human in my my household. Complete invasion of a parasite, I guess, is what I would call it.
Pretty much.
And we got back on track, and then lost the host, and decided at that point, okay, let's keep going. And it's great. I mean, I think it to me it makes sense. So if people don't know, the Goblin Lore Podcast is kind of a magic lore or magic storyline, magic community meets the real world. It's really meeting mental health concepts, or it's meeting different aspects of our community that are really focused on the gathering.
Mm-hmm.
We've interviewed cosplayers, and we had on a Major League Baseball player, which is also, once again, like.
Did you get Hunter Pence on? I've been trying to reach out to him because I'd love to be.
Yeah.
Just be like under the guise of, oh yeah, let's talk Magic. Totally. No, we're talking baseball the entire time.
So what was hilarious is it was like the point of the episode was supposed to be, I ended up doing a 2-parter, and it was right when our other podcast host, Joe, who was a huge baseball guy, writes for fantasy football sites, like a huge sports guy. He's the one who got the ball rolling. He basically reached out to the Rangers at the point.
Oh, dang.
And like, somehow got in touch with his agent and got it arranged, but then it ended up just being like me and Hunter Pence, and it was going to be like, what would sports look like in Magic? And we had some like kind of cool conversation about, you know, we always see Magic worlds in strife. I mean, that's kind of the point.
Mm-hmm.
We're dropped into turmoil, we're dropped into war, we're dropped into chaos, we're dropped into something going on, and like sports don't really have a role in that. You know, we get Battle Bond. We get kind of the idea of running the Dragon's Maze, but like, you know, we're running the Dragon's Maze and a bunch of people are gonna die, and like the idea of just like sports for sports and entertainment is really not there. So we kind of talked about that, and then he just started interviewing me, which is like the trippiest thing in the world, because he didn't know anything about lore. He didn't know what the color pie was. He didn't know about the stories and the books. Like, what was cool was to learn how he had learned story through just playing the cards.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nicol Bolas is a bad guy. I hate when he hits the field. He's this dragon. I know that there's this concept of War with a Spark, and there's all these planeswalkers, but like, didn't know what a spark was, didn't know why. So it was what he had picked up through like Arena. So some voice acting, but I mean, it was really kind of cool because he just started like bombarding me with questions about like lore base. It was really
cool. Oh, it's interesting.
So I mean, these are things that like, yeah, 2.5 years ago you would be like, yes, you're going to interview somebody that was on a World Series championship team. I would have been like, that's fun.
I know, that's awesome. That's awesome. So how long have you been doing the podcast? It's been 2.5 years?
2.5 years. So our anniversary is in June. So that would be our 3rd anniversary will be coming up in June.
Oh, nice. Awesome. Yeah. So what have been, so you've been doing this podcasting journey, 100 episodes by the time this comes out. What are some things that you've learned that, you know, maybe you want to tell other people that are interested in podcasting? It doesn't even have to be about Magic podcasting, but just in general.
I think that some of the things that we've learned is kind of the communication if you have co-hosts, because that's kind of what sunk us a few times, was just that we're all people who really got along, but, you know, being, I think, Magic players tend to be a little bit more passive at times.
Yeah.
I see that. As much as there's the aggressive behavior that can come across on Twitter, at their core, a lot of Magic players are not the best at communicating. And even me, somebody who teaches communication and teaches people how to like use social skills, it's not an easy thing to do among friends. But we started off with like not really having clearly defined roles, because we just kind of, we had this framework of a show, we had a framework of kind of what we wanted to do, but you know, like, okay, Joe's gonna edit because he's the only one who knows how to edit, he's doing this, this, and this, but like beyond that, we never really had structure or understanding. Like, okay, is one of us going to be more of the face of interviewing? Is one of us going to be more writing episodes behind the scenes? We just didn't really have those discussions, and that's something I think is important for people to have. Getting an idea before you ever start recording of just a list going of episode topics, so that you
very important.
Want to keep going, like, has legs, because like you can have some great ideas and then you hit 10 episodes in and you don't know what to talk about, and then you're struggling. And that what we learned is if we weren't putting things out consistently, it shows. Like, you need to have something coming out consistently. People are going to understand about the life. I mean, ours especially, we talk about mental health and self-care. People are very understanding. But they're going to be understanding to a point. You know, if we drop off for 2 months and we don't have episodes, it's going to suffer.
Yeah.
You know, it's very hard. And so one thing we did is we had like a planning document, and we just started throwing just ideas, and we still have those. Some of those we have still never touched on, but we know that they're there.
Perfect thing to talk about. Yeah, that's it's like when Pixie and I started Magic for Normies, because
one of my favorite names.
Oh,
like there's certain names like the whole idea of Magic for Normies, and just like, yeah, it's just it is fantastic.
I love doing it because I've tried other podcasting adventures before. I mean, not just Magic with Zuby. Yes, that's like been my main one, but I've done other ventures, and you're right. Like, working with a co-host is very hard. Or co-host, because with Magic with Zuby, I'm by myself, right? I have literally no one else doing anything. It's all me. So when trying these other podcast ventures, sometimes the other co-hosts would just expect me to do everything, and I'm all like, I can't though, you know? Yeah. With Magic for Normies, like, I made it like pretty clear with Pixie, like, I can't be the only one doing this. Like, I want to do this with you, and we had a talk, and the thing that I love about it is we both come together, and just like you said, we have an idea we have an idea page. Like, we'll both go in there just throwing random ideas, and whatever sticks and all that. And I feel like it's one of the most important things is communication, especially behind the scenes with it.
And I think one thing that we've really worked at, I think in this last year, one thing that's become more of a focus is having a mission, or kind of a mission statement, or kind of what we want to be doing. I mean, we have that broadly. Like, mental health is our big focus. Like, it is really wanting, for me, that was part of the draw of getting asked to be on the cast. I wanted a way to be able to talk about what I do for a living, and to raise awareness about mental health topics, about stigma, about those concepts that, like, I get to talk about in therapy all day long, but I don't really get to do it with Magic.
Mm-hmm.
So talking about self-care, talking about ways to take care of people, just, you know, hitting some of these topics that I think people would probably shy away from. I mean, we've talked about suicide. We've talked about you know, depression. We've talked about social anxiety. We've talked about kind of I'm trying to think of just hard, but just like what cognitive distortions are, what that concept is when it comes to bad thinking, how horrible we are at. We did like the gambler's fallacy, but it's really this idea of how bad we are at humans at noticing randomness, because we want to find patterns. So
yeah,
these are topics that are not necessarily light, and so I think they get shied away from. And we do silly episodes. Like, we have a whole series on color pie of food. We've like got our own taxonomy going each time about like how the color pie might function. But it's a great like thought experiment to, well, how do you understand the color pie? Our very first one ever was doing the color pie of art with Kiln Fiend Parter.
Oh, Michelle. Oh yeah, I love her.
we just flat out looked at different art styles and kind of tried to look at how that might fit into the color pie, because it opens up ways to talk about these concepts with either non-magical audiences or audiences who maybe aren't as invested or don't necessarily have that language. So like the color pie is a like very difficult concept, and the more things you can apply it to, you can really kind of start to understand it. And I think that for me, that's what made the podcast be where we wanted to stick with it. And then this last year, we've really made a commitment that we want to build up voices from marginalized communities. But we're trying to do this in a way that is, I mean, I think what had happened was we saw after George Floyd, so we're located in Minneapolis, so me.
Oh, yeah.
The other
Yeah.
So, you know, very, very close to home. I mean, the actual kind of, the protesting got within 4 or 5 blocks of my house. Like, I'm, you know, this is very much my neighborhood, my people.
Mm-hmm.
This is where my wife and I chose to live in this area because of the diversity that's in our area. And so it hit very close to home. And we realized that we wanted to make much more of a commitment to kind of raising those voices when we could, and seeking them out even more than we had kind of done to date. But what we found was that was kind of the list of like, well, we're just going to invite a bunch of people from these communities to come on our show. And then it becomes tokenism, right? You know, and what we've tried to do and what we really want to keep doing is whose work do we like that is from these groups that maybe isn't getting the audience, or they're maybe not having it, that we want to collaborate with. Like, anybody that we've approached about this is like, we would love to have you on the show. What do you want to talk about? It's not like, here, we want you to talk about what it means to be a black man playing Magic.
Yeah.
Be a woman in our community. Like, if you want to hit on those things and those things come up in conversation organically, great. But that's not why we're having you on the show. We like your work already. We just want to highlight it. And I think that that's been kind of that, you know, like thinking about what the purpose of your cast is and what you're trying to do.
No, I love that. I'm very much of the same mind where if I bring someone on the show, it's because I genuinely want to talk to you. I genuinely want to talk to you, understand who you are as a person. And, you know, yeah, we talk magic and all that stuff because, you know, it's inevitable. But I've had some.
It's a framework.
Yeah. I've had some people I've have on, like, we talk magic maybe 5 minutes, then go on about whatever the hell else for the next 2 hours, you know?
Yeah.
So, no, I love that.
The one other thing is, you know, and this comes back to the communication, but if you're also thinking, and this is something is difficult to do, but if you can be respectful, ask people to be on your show. Like, if you have people that you do want to work with, like, approach them in an appropriate manner. You know, you don't just walk up to them and say, be on my show. But, you know, we asked people that we were interested in talking to, and there's very many people that we thought were like, well, they'll never be on, but we're just going to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And we're shocked because a lot of people said, like, I don't get asked. I remember Shivam at some point saying, like, hey, you should have... saying to people, like, into the Twitterverse, like, you should have me on your show. And I think he's somebody that people might not think to ask because they say, well, that's a big name, that's, you know, like, he's already got a large following, why would he want to talk to me? And it was kind of the same thing with just a lot of the people that we've approached, is we've just asked. And once again, not harassing people,
Yeah.
You know, like, approaching, and, you know, we say this, we approach some people, we may never hear from them, and they're going to say no, that's fine. But it doesn't hurt to ask somebody if they want to be on, and just be prepared for, they may say no.
Yeah, and, you know, you just move on from that.
Yeah.
Though from podcaster to podcaster, the worst, and I'm not going to name names or anything, the worst is when they ghost you, right? And they say, oh, yeah, I'd love to come on your show. When do you want to schedule? And then you're like, okay, yeah, I've got these dates open, and, you know, blah, 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 never hear from them again. And it's like, I'll try to reach it. And I get it. I totally get it. People have lives and blah, blah, blah. I 100% understand. It's just so, that's the thing that always irks me. I'd rather have you just say, no, can't do it, or just ignore me. Don't say, yes, I'd love to come on, and then never respond back. Totally. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to name names or anything, but it's just, that kind of annoys me a little bit. Like, and I totally understand it happens. That's just me bitching.
I think that for me, that like, you know, it's kind of that is an area I had to learn to like not take certain things personally. Like, it happens, and I mean, what's funny is, so
yeah, I'd rather have people just ignore me. Like, if they ignore me, I don't care, whatever, move on.
Right.
Yeah.
I was reflecting, like, this week actually. So I have been on Twitter for over 10. So I've been on Magic Twitter for over 10 years.
Damn, you've seen quite an evolution of it. I've been on, what, 6-7 years now, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really is an evolution. Like, it
yeah,
blows my mind to see. Like, and one of the things that I think is interesting is, I think that people who have come to know me from Twitter for the last 3 or 4 years really have seen kind of where I am now, which is this person whose commitment is to, like, mental health, a lot of positivity, a lot of, like, self-care, a champion of those things. And I was always a champion of, like, mental health and that stuff. But I was a very, very depressed, angry person when I kind of first was on Twitter. I was not a positive person at all. I was a downer. I was a negative person. So
yeah, I had my ways of that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's weird because I have all these people talk about me. I've had people tell me, like, I love how positive you are, and like there still is the part of me that's like, nobody go back and look at my early tweets. Just
oh man,
don't do that. You don't need to see it. Like, the good news is people can grow.
Yes.
I am proof that you can move beyond, like, just starting arguments and arguing for the sake of arguing, and
oh yeah.
Where at times. And,
oh man, it's
yeah.
As much as I love Magic Twitter, and I think just like Twitter in general, and I think this goes for all social media, it's just using Magic Twitter as an example is when there's the drama of the day or the drama of the hour, just someone said this and just, you know, whether it's valid or not, or you know, important or not, it's just sort of, and I used to involve myself a lot with those like a couple years ago and all that, but now I'm at the point where it's like, I don't want, maybe it is my privilege speaking that I don't want to get involved with it. And it's also because I also don't have the mental energy to want to get involved. And maybe I find it not as important. Like I said, whatever the issue may be, I may agree or disagree, but it's like, I just don't want to spend the energy doing that when I can be focusing on something else.
I think that a big part, you mentioned kind of the privilege piece to it.
Yeah.
I think that for me, it's like there's the element to kind of comes into play, and I think that what it is I try not to shirk away from being able to acknowledge my own privilege and stuff. I think where it came in was not needing to respond to every horrible thing that is being said that other people are already responding to.
Maybe that's a better way of thinking about it. Yeah.
Being like, do I have something that is very tangible to add to this conversation? Or am I just going to retweet and amplify something that is already horrible?
Yeah.
And is known to be, and are there better people to be doing this than me? And it doesn't mean that I'm not going to call somebody out if I see something.
Oh, yeah.
It does mean that I don't need to, like you said, I don't have to get involved and spend...
And actively seek it out. Yeah.
And sneak it out. And I this has always been an issue. I mean, and to the point where, I mean, I created a second Twitter account that moved a lot of my family stuff, a lot of even some of my political stuff to there, just because I needed a break from scrolling through Magic Twitter. I have impulse control issues, and if it's there, I will look at it. Now with having a second account, I do find that I'm able to, like, okay, I'm just going to go over and see what's going on over in this more curated area in some ways.
No.
Because as a creator, I do feel that, like, I want to be engaged with the community, and I want to be talking to people, and I have an okay enough size following, but, like, because of having that too, my Twitter feed for Magic, my, like, primary one, became so bloated that I would just miss stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Would miss tweets from people that I really want to see and want to know what's going on with.
Nope, totally understand that, man. It's
I can't, man.
I can't. It's
can't. Yeah.
just pretty much I can't do it anymore. It's just I get on there, look at some stuff sometimes, like, respond, and just get off. And do that like 100 times a day.
And on my phone, next to my phone.
Oh God, yeah. Freaking smartphones. So I like that you discuss a lot about mental health. I think that is extremely important. And especially, I feel like, and you know, you're in the field of it, especially with who you work with on a day-to-day. I don't know if you say it or anything. I don't want to.
Oh no, I do.
Oh, okay.
I'm a psychologist, and I work with veterans.
Okay.
I work at the VA, and yep. One of the reasons I go by Hobbes is very specifically that it's very much a keeping my personal life and private life kind of split. I mean, just for an appropriateness.
Oh yeah, totally understand. Yeah.
And it is funny to the point though where there are a fair number of people who do not know my real name who were like at my wedding. I guess they know it, but they don't use it.
Well, just like
I'm called Hobbes in public.
just like my nickname Zuby, it's I've had that nickname since I was like 17, 18 now or whatever. It basically is my name at this point where people I respond to it. I like even my best friend like calls me Zuby and all that, and he's known me for a long ass time and all that. So
yeah. My wife and I have been out in public and have literally had somebody like yell across the street. We're like just out for a walk in our neighborhood. So, yeah, I mean it is, but yeah, I always tell people, you know, like that's one of those things that, so I'm a psychologist. What is nice is about doing the podcast is I'm really able to kind of share that information and also still keep those like ethical lines of like I am not providing services.
Yeah.
Doing those things, I'm just providing information and a place to like talk about something that I am very passionate about.
No, definitely. And do you feel at the year 2021 that the stigma of mental health is getting less and less as each passing year, or do you still find there's still a huge stigma? And maybe it's because you work with more military people, or I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
So I'm coming at this from the perspective of kind of I have been interested in this field since 2000 and something. Let's say 2002, for the sake of I was in undergrad 2002. This was my senior year of undergrad. I wrote a thesis on representation of mental health in films from the 1980s. And what I found was that there wasn't a lot of research on how mental health is represented in media. But we watched a bunch of films and saw kind of like the stigma, you know.
It was for crazy people, or, you know, if you talked to a therapist, you were, you know, considered unmanly or not strong and stuff like that. Yeah, I totally remember that stuff in movies, 80s and 90s.
Yeah, and just language of like loonies and crazies and nutso and schizo and all of this language that is still, you know, I've had this discussion of like getting rid of the word crazy from my own vocabulary is not easy to do, and I'm somebody that's keenly aware of that language. I will say that seeing representations of mental illness in film and in TV and discussions in media, it's gotten better. I don't know how much better it's gotten. I mean, I think that there still is just an incredible amount of stigma. Twitter is a place where I see people willing to talk about it a little bit more. So we're starting to see people willing to just say that they have a mental health diagnosis, what that means, or that they experience these things. I don't think that it's widespread, because I think one of the things that we get a trap of at times is realizing that Twitter, especially, is a microcosm of society. And,
yes.
It actually is, you know, like that idea that more people are off of it than are on it still. And so even then, you're only seeing it discussed in certain circles. So, you know, if you want to call it an echo chamber, but like I see people talking about positive aspects of mental health, but I'm also following people who are going to be talking about positive aspects of mental health. I can easily see people on all sides of spectrums, politically or not, when I look at like a Twitter trend, that are going to, you know, like make fun of people and say, God, they need to be on their meds, or it's the worst of everything we heard even about Trump was, you know, like, and I can't make that determination. I've never evaluated the man personally. Do I have my thoughts? Sure. But it was really just this idea that, like, you need to be medicated, or they're all a bunch of loonies. I mean, and this is language coming from the people who theoretically are supposed to be the people of empathy. And I do think that mental health and this idea of being crazy is because we don't know what to do with ideas that aren't normal or don't appear normal. And I'm going to use normal broadly, because that's also a word I just don't use. But there is still a lot of stigma from all sides. And I think that it is still an area that people do make fun of people for being quote unquote crazy.
So
it's one of those things that it makes me it bums me out. I think we have not made the strides that I would personally like to see.
So I totally get what you're saying, like from a social media standpoint and just what we see on TV and movies. But what about what you see face to face? Like when you have someone coming to you, and I obviously you don't need to divulge details or anything like that, but I know it HIPAA and all that. So
I am very, very good at talking about these things.
So
luckily,
no, I've got to deal with HIPAA every day. So
I will say that I have seen a willingness, even in my time working in the VA setting, I have seen a willingness to ask for help, and ask for help. It's sooner rather than after something kind of like a hospitalization or something kind of getting to a breaking point, that people are asking for help and see it as kind of it's being spun with more of this idea of resiliency. Like the military is even trying to do more emphasis on resiliency and resiliency training.
What does that mean exactly, resiliency?
Yeah. So resiliency is kind of the, like, it is kind of that flip side of focusing just on mental illness or symptoms.
Okay.
Resiliency is focusing on positive psychology or health. It's what are the habits of healthy people. So what are the things that you do to keep yourself healthy? What are the things that keep you resilient, that keep you from developing kind of symptoms? So if, like, we think of this as one of my favorite things to talk about is this idea of what's called the stress vulnerability model. And this is this idea that the very classic psychology 101 for anybody who's ever had it is, you know, there's always been a discussion of, you know, genetics versus environment, right? Like nature versus nurture. And, you know, then for a lot of time that was really thought that it was like one or the other, or in that's really what it was. I mean, there was full debates. That's where we kind of even get Chomsky coming into play, was like debating Skinner back in the day about nature versus nurture. And like, lo and behold, what we find is it's neither. I mean, it's both. There's an interaction between them. And it's kind of the interplay between them, both stress and you know, stress being kind of anything that's from our environment or has an effect on us, and vulnerability, our genetics, our makeup, our, you know, our substances, whatever is being used to change our brain chemistry. And it's the interaction between those really kind of predict what's going to happen downstream. And, you know, a lot of mental health, prior to what I talk about when it comes to this idea of what's called the recovery model of mental health, which is really also that idea that it's not to treat mental health as like illness or just symptoms or just diagnosing. It's to focus on what are goals that people have, and then, you know, symptoms come in because it's what's getting in the way of those goals. It's not the symptoms themselves that are the problem. It's, you know, we even say this with like, there's a whole group in England called voice hearers, and they are people that experience auditory hallucinations, but there's no functional impairment. It's not distressing, and it's not bothersome. They've learned to live with them. They actually find it very supportive, and, you know, that gets labeled as, you know, well, they hear voices. Well, that's a symptom. Get a check mark there. One of the things that the DSM, so like the diagnostic manual that we use, everything when it comes to a mental health diagnosis technically has to have impairment. There has to be an impairment in functioning. And so from my perspective, that's what we are trying to focus on. Okay, you're coming into me because you're sad and depressed and can't get out of bed. Well, what are you not doing? You know, like, what are the things that you want to be doing that is getting in the way of? How can we help those improve so that you can get to where you want to be? It's a goal focused. It's focused on kind of, and then resiliency is then, okay, well, how do you maintain that healthy behavior? So resiliency is really kind of, what are the habits that you do that help you kind of stay at your normal baseline, your day-to-day baseline? So is exercise something that, you know, if you exercise regularly, you know that helps keep you at an even keel. Sleep, playing Magic, you know, what are these habits that you do? And that's where resiliency kind of comes in. And the military has had a little bit more focus on that. And I think Ian Dixon was even talking about becoming like a trainer, to be a resiliency trainer in the military.
Oh, so interesting.
The other half, though, is like, this is what happens, I think, on the veteran side. The active duty side, there is some of that they're working on rolling out. There still is very much clearly, like, you ask for help in the military, you could be ending your military career. I mean, you know, you admit to depression,
yeah,
you admit to anxiety, you admit to suicidal thoughts. Yeah,
you're done. They got to take you out, especially like if you're boots on the ground type thing.
Yeah, and you could easily be removed from duty. And like, yeah, we'll bring you back in, but then, you know, I know plenty of veterans that just like that ended up being the beginning of the end.
Do you only work with veterans, or do you do active duty as well? Or is there a difference, or?
There is. So Minnesota is interesting in that we have like the National Guard. So National Guard is technically not active duty except for when you're activated as part of like a deployment.
They're more reserved, right?
Right, like, yes. Sorry, so like the reserve. I'm actually thinking, yeah. So like either of those is that kind of situation where if you had like your active duty portion, like your 4 years, or if you got activated for a deployment, you can receive care at the VA, but you could still be enlisted in like the reserve or the government.
Yeah.
But that's a rare situation. For the most part, who we are seeing is people who are pretty much fully out of the military.
So the people that you see right now that are veterans, are you seeing a different age range of, like, you know, younger to much older patients, or and is that something that's relatively new that's happening, especially like older ones too?
So it used to be that, you know, when I started at the VA, we were getting kind of the first wave of people coming out of Iraq, Afghanistan, Operation Enduring Freedom, Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Yeah.
So we were getting that, but the bulk of our people were still the end of the World War II veterans that were passing away.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of them were engaging in VA care.
I find that surprising, actually.
Yeah. Well, my grandfather died.
Because my grandfather was a World War II vet, and
3 years. My grandfather died 3 years ago.
Yeah.
In 99.
Oh wow, mine passed away, I think 3-4 years ago. It was 96.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, that's the end of the age. But I mean, I've also worked in the VA on it for basically 10 years.
Yeah.
So 85. So it was at that point that basically it was very skewed towards that, and like, but Vietnam is your bulk, right? Because like that was our biggest conflict where we had the most number of veterans, and then you'd basically do like Vietnam and then just like drop off like little bump from first Gulf War, and then now what it is that it's really bimodal. You have the Vietnam era veterans who are now actually replacing the World War II veterans in terms of getting to the age where it's end of life stuff. So our big cohorts are there, and then like pretty open gap where you get people in there, but it's not as common in that age, and then our young veterans. And so we're starting to see a lot more younger veterans. And when I mean veteran, I'm younger, I'm going to say like 30 and under.
Yeah, no, I totally know what you mean. So another question I have for you, and I, like I said, this comes from someone who doesn't know anything the way this works. I speak about my grandfather was a World War II vet, and I sort of compare this with my friends who were in the military, like during the early 2000s, and just compare and contrast like how different the training was. Like for my grandfather, they tell me like, they beat you and, really instill like whatever they can to make a soldier out of you. Whereas, now they can't physically hit you or anything like that like they could before. And also, and where I'm going with this is with a lot of like how mental health is important, as it's getting more and more into the public sphere, has there been, or are there any branches or like departments where they talk about the mental health of soldiers in like, especially during training? Because as we all know, like especially for like Marines or just infantry soldiers, you have to really break them down in order to get them to become a soldier and all that. Like that's one of the things that an outsider like me understands. You got to break down their barriers, make them be able to follow orders, be a team member, and boom. And a lot of that can be traumatizing for people. Yeah. So what is there anything happening behind the scenes that you're aware of with military to, I don't want to say soften soldiers up, because we need them to be able to defend us in case stuff happens and all that, but also in terms of maybe trying to lessen any kind of PTSD or brace them to understand the horrors that they may face? Or
yeah, I mean, and I do think that just kind of comes back to the main thing that they're trying is really this idea of resiliency training.
Okay.
That idea that it's teaching you skills to be able to cope with what you do and to be able to cope with it. So yes, it's still hard. It still is grueling. It still is. I think there is recognition that on the back end, when people are processing out of the military, that, in the past, it's really been kind of just like here's a couple of weeks of classes to transition back to civilian life, and that's not working, because part of what makes you a good soldier is to follow orders. Mm-hmm. and it is very true that having a black or white kind of thinking mindset is adaptive in that environment, because you are, it literally can be a matter of life and death to not follow directions, to not follow instructions, or to not be able to react to something without thinking about it. And that's that idea. It's like the military really reinforces black or white thinking. That is the category that really gets reinforced. And so we talk a lot about like unlearning that, and that's where they're trying to do a little bit better, I think, about reintegration. Because that's where the difficulty is with going to civilian life. Like,
yeah.
To talk about, like, you didn't, like, it's stressful to figure out what to eat when they get back to civilian life.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Like I've interviewed
it's like,
when I was an IT manager, I interviewed plenty of military people, and if they would have been perfect for the type of position if it was a very structured role, and because they were very structured people, had great resumes, and I hate to say this, because like I remember just interviewing some great people, but we wouldn't hire a lot of them because we were not it was not a structured role per se. It was a lot of just, we unfortunately don't have time to train you the way we'd want you to. We really need someone to hit the ground running, and we don't have time to hold your hand, because that was just what we had to deal with and what I had to deal with as a manager too, that we just didn't have the resources to be able to, hold your hand. And I can see where that's got to be tough for military to unlearn that, because that's literally all they do,
Yeah, and that's where it becomes difficult to, if you think of a safety thing. So I know a lot of veterans who, work in places like warehouses or just logistics type jobs, warehouse type jobs, those types of things. And then like their coworkers don't follow regulations or don't follow rules, it is very stressful, because not following those rules in the military can have very severe consequences. And it may not have that in the civilian world. It may not be that, if you don't do things exactly by the book, it's not life or death. It's not necessarily going to be that somebody's going to end up hurt. But like, it is very stressful to them because, they see how things should be done.
Mm-hmm.
And they're totally okay with that. They just want people to follow the rules and do it like it should be done. And so trying to unlearn some of that, and that's where I think we need the biggest work, from the point where people maybe exit the military to, like, not everybody who exits gets VA care. Not everybody accesses veteran care. One of the saddest stats that I've seen is, if you look at the rate of veteran suicide, which, there's all kinds of numbers on, like, the 22 veterans a day.
Jesus.
When we look at that, most of those veterans had never had mental health care. They'd never accessed mental health care. It's one of the things that's a struggle of the thing. So, it's seen, this is one of those things that's like those issues that are difficult to really understand. And I sometimes am trying to help people that I know understand, like, what the VA does and kind of what the VA gets its reputation for, and where there's problems and where there aren't. Because it's not that there's not problems, but there are some of the problems that are ascribed to, like, the VA are not really to do with the VA as a medical institution. And this is one where for us, the failure is we're not getting people to come. We're not getting people through the door. But people are very hard to get to come in, and maybe they don't trust us, and maybe they don't. But, like,
well, I mean, just as a civilian who's never had to deal with VA, I mean, shit, I hear so many bad things about VA. Like, it takes forever to get an appointment, or you can never get a hold of anyone. And, when you do get medical care, it's complete crap, and the doctor doesn't care about you. And,
yeah.
It's like, I don't know anybody who's had experience with the mental health side of it, but just from the medical side, I hear nothing but bad things.
And then, like, from us, like, even from me sitting in here, like, we get to see kind of the stats of, like, certain things that are, like, the VAs, or a lot of the VAs are associated with medical schools and residencies, and they're actually, like, on the forefront of a lot of medications. I mean, a lot of things, but, like, what people don't hear about is the fact that, like, if you or I wanted to go get a specialty mental health appointment today, like, if you wanted to go see a psychiatrist,
mm-hmm.
or even to get in to see a therapist, that's not happening overnight. If I was to call up and try to get in to see a psychiatrist for mental health medications, most mental health medications in the community are prescribed through primary care.
Yep.
Because if you want to get in to see a specialist, you're looking at months to get an appointment.
Yeah.
So I don't think people realize that the wait times are not necessarily different in the VA than they are for the community. And it is seen as a failure because it is seen as failing soldiers. And I think that there's a whole separate piece that is attached to that. And so it makes it harder to have some of these discussions about, like, well, what are the legitimate problems with the VA versus what are not. And another area I would say is, certain things that they've done, like the whole, like, system for checking, like, where they check, like, right patient, right name, right area of the body, or whatever, like how they go through all of those, like, when they come into your room.
Yeah.
That stuff was all rolled out through, like, the VA. All of that stuff, it was actually developed and designed and rolled out through the VA. A lot of stuff that is now in community care, that's a standard of community care, started in the VA. And a lot of things that is hard to realize is that the best treatments, the other thing that people hear about is they hear about, like, the horrors of, like, PTSD treatment.
Mm-hmm.
So that was some of the articles that went around, like, they made me talk about my trauma, they made me relive it, they made me do this. Whereas in evidence-based practices for PTSD, like, that is the gold standard. That it actually is the best approach to be able to successfully deal with PTSD. Because the hallmark of PTSD is avoidance. And so what ends up happening is and I say this to people with therapy, it's my big joke when I'm working with somebody, is like, I'm asking you to feel uncomfortable. I'm asking you to not be like, I'm asking you to experience things that are going to feel uncomfortable, but there's a purpose to it. Like, there's a point to it, because what you've been doing, you're telling me isn't working. And I do think that that's where, you know, it sounds horrible from an outside perspective of, I went to the VA and I got with a therapist and they just made me talk about what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
They did, and it's probably true that they did. And honestly, you know, if we're looking at evidence-based medicine and we're trying to be scientific and we're trying to respect science, that's what we have the best research on, is being the most effective.
So what do we do as a country, and what do you, I guess you or the military does to try to get more people access to this help?
I think this is where I do think that we're seeing more improvement, because I do think that we are seeing younger veterans that are being more willing to ask for help. And so I will say that I have in the last 5 years have seen a lot younger of veterans. What was happening was we were seeing older veterans who just did not get care for many years, and they only really came because things had gotten so bad
Mm-hmm.
to the point of like they just were, you know, this is where the substance use was coming in, this is where hospitalizations were coming in.
Yeah, because a lot of this is all, like, I guess in terms of science or I don't know what you would call it, like a lot of this is still new, right? It's only a couple decades old that we even have research on this, because you know, I think back to our grandparents. It's, my grandpa used to call it being shell shocked, was PTSD.
Yep.
And all that, and you know, he would tell me like he'd hear a helicopter above and then just duck down and hide, you know, beneath a chair or something like that, or table.
Right. But people just did it.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and like, what, you know, we're even finding the interesting pieces. A lot of people from those earlier conflicts came back and they were able to kind of be in a society that worked around it, and they returned straight to work and they worked their career, and that's kind of what happened. And
so what was different back then compared to now then? Is it the type of jobs, or the...
I think there's a lot. I think that...
Or society in general, or...
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is this is where we're seeing kind of the larger societal kind of things come in, that a lot of them probably were in the ability to just... Or what we found was this stuff wasn't talked about, it was there.
Yeah.
You know, the family that you just didn't talk about the fact that, like, grandpa got drunk and punched things a lot. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that didn't get discussed, or hit grandma, or whatever it was. You know, I mean, I'm just saying, like, you know, those things were probably just, they weren't known. And it's kind of one of those things that what you found was, you know, we've looked at this. It's like you got the people who had multiple DUIs and were in jail, you know, and that probably was a large part mental health stuff that was going on. It just wasn't talked about, and it was seen as acceptable to be a drunk and be angry about it. And now we're in a society that, you know, and I think that this is a good thing, but like that isn't acceptable to do.
Yeah.
We don't just kind of try to push it under the rug, or we don't just, you know, that's, and I think that is where we're kind of seeing that there is, in my experience, there is more of an awareness from younger people that they can ask for help. I do think that we are seeing it, and I just keep coming back to that. Like, I will say that I am starting to see a lot younger people, and 5-6 years ago, even then, it was like the younger veterans are still harder to engage.
Yeah.
You know, and we're trying to do things. So, like, I'm working with she just finished her doctorate degree last year. We're doing a D&D for social anxiety group.
Mm-hmm.
And we have tons of therapy groups at the VA. And we have tons of really what I think are very good therapy groups at the VA. But they're not going to be a wide range appeal. We've easily been able to recruit people for the D&D group. And I laugh about it because 7 years ago when I was a trainee, I wanted to do a Magic the Gathering group, and it was kind of like one of these, like, well, we'll let you do it, but this is just kind of like silly.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't really, there was no kind of thought about it. Whereas, I'm already telling them, like, hey, I did grad school in San Diego. I can tell you right now who was coming into my LGS. There's a lot of service members coming into my LGS.
Yeah.
And same thing kind of happened now with this D&D group. Once again, there was kind of like, well, we let Thomas do this or Hobbes do this 7 years ago. Well, this student wants to do a D&D group. Let's see what it takes. And me going before the managers and being like, I'm going to guarantee you something right now. We have way more veterans that are playing D&D than you have any idea about, because most of our staff are not military. They don't necessarily know the culture. I mean, they know aspects of the culture, but they don't know that, like, you're on a ship. It's very easy to have, like, somebody have a dungeon master guide, a couple of monster manuals, and dice.
And paper, and yeah.
And paper. You're good to go.
That's all you need.
And I think that is something that's kind of cool for me. Like, so that's the part that's gotten me excited lately, is like the VA has been a lot more willing to let us do some of this stuff. And like, we're beginning to kind of be able to, I think, get some of the veterans who are geeks and nerds out of the woodwork. And that's one of the things that we've done this past year. We're on like our third cohort of running this D&D campaign that is really meant to help with social skills and anxiety. And like, it was kind of a, like, we presented it, there was kind of like joking about it, like, and then yet we've had zero problem recruiting full cohorts with almost no advertising.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's totally awesome. I'm glad to hear that it's becoming less of a stigma in the military. I guess maybe this leads back towards the resiliency training, because one of the things that, like, this comes from someone who knows nothing about what it's like to be in boot camp or anything, basic training, but I'd have to assume, especially back in the day, a lot of toxic masculinity, a lot of toxic traits of, being manly men and all that. Is that kind of culture still prevalent a lot in the military? And do you know if they're doing anything to combat that? And like I said, I know it probably feels so counterproductive because of the black and white nature soldiers have to be too,
Yeah, but I think it is recognizing that, like, I think what is happening is that we're having, what is coming to light now that wasn't, is the amount of just sexual trauma that happens in the military to both men and women.
Oh yeah.
So one thing that I think, if you've ever researched, so like there's been a ton in the news about Fort Hood.
I've heard about, I don't know much about it though.
There's just been a ton of, like, lots of soldiers dying. There's been, soldiers disappearing, women and men, but the rates of sexual trauma in the military are still very high. And I think that is actually probably one of the biggest problems that we have right now. More than, mental health has always kind of been kind of an issue. One of the things one thing that that's been discussed too is this idea that when we need more soldiers is also the time when you don't necessarily screen as much for who is going to be successful in the military.
So something like when 9/11 happened and we just had to ramp up a lot of military.
And people that probably would not have been accepted into the military get accepted into the military. And, there's been some research studies done and to show that, people who maybe have more negative outcomes are people that probably had predisposing factors to that. And so that's where it's kind of that thing that's kind of that hard part to say when you're talking about, like, what are they doing versus not doing. I think they're doing some stuff, but, like, we're also still seeing, and I think this is why we're seeing the younger group, is we're seeing people that probably were just, all of us are made up of, are suited for different things in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Probably, like, I guarantee you that I do not think that I would make a good soldier. I do not think that I really would, I do not think that boot camp and that mindset is something that I would deal well with. But I can see that there would have been situations, maybe if I had been in certain points in my life, where I would have needed to go into the military. And when we relaxed kind of letting people in, we probably were letting people, so like the number one predictor of like having a bad response to trauma is having a previous trauma. And then you take people who are traumatized and you're putting them into the military. You're putting people with a lot of risk factors for developing mental health problems into situations that are meant to stress them out. And so,
well, I think it also doesn't help that we get people joining the military because a lot of times they have no choice. You know, they come from either really bad backgrounds or, you know, poverty. And because the government is so quick to, you know, you join the military, you get free college education. But what does that mean, though? Like, what are you sacrificing to get that done?
Yep. And for a lot of people, it is a good option.
Oh yeah. I'm not doubting it. It isn't a bad option or anything. It's.
And I think it's hard too, as we basically have been in wartime for a lot of people's lifetimes. I mean,
yeah.
You want to talk about like the magic community who might be listening to this. There's definitely people that are listening to this that basically have only known the U.S. at quote unquote wartime. And
yeah.
I know a lot of people that served and did their 4 years, and that was just kind of something that you did, and did 4 years and served and during peacetime, and it was a very different experience than now. And I think that is also why when we talk about the eras, it's going to be the ones where we either had forced conscription like Vietnam, or now where we've just been continuously at war and ramping up the number of soldiers that are needed.
Yeah. Oh man, thank you for talking about this. Like this is the kind of stuff that I love, like just picking people's brains about stuff. And thank you for opening up and talking about this. It's been great.
I like to have the opportunity because I do think that it's military culture is something that's very, very like, it is something that we have been like, we need to do a like Goblin Lore episode on this, because we have, I mean, and that's the thing, if you want to look around the Twitter community, there are a lot of service people, either active duty still or retired or veterans, that I can think of like that's, I have a whole like list of separate people that are that like I there's a lot of people who served that are very active on Twitter, and I think that it is an interesting thing to learn more about as military culture.
Yeah, for sure. I guess let's move on to a little bit lighter subject.
Awesome.
And
is this the one that I was brought on to tell you because you're wrong?
Which one? Oh, Lord of the Rings talk? Yeah.
Is that what we're moving into?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, Lord of the Rings, how Two Towers is the worst out of all three movies.
Well, it's like to me, the fact of the matter is, so this started from a conversation on Twitter.
Yeah.
It's actually when I reached out to
Yeah.
what we were going to talk about, because not only were you like wrong about that.
What? How dare you?
You're also just wrong about what you chose to be the best.
Yeah, Fellowship.
In my opinion.
It's the closest.
Oh wait, okay, sorry. Okay, never mind. For some reason, okay, then we're actually not going to be as bad.
Okay.
Because I thought that you chose Return of the King.
I mean, it was a great movie, but hell no. I'm definitely a Tolkien purist more than anything.
Okay, so then, because see, that was my whole thing. I thought, like, for one thing, Two Towers is, and it was in the books, and this is where movie making gets a little weird. It is The Empire Strikes Back. It is the middle book, 2 books of a series, right? So they did shoot things in a way that weren't good. Like, you know, we have to win on like a high note. So
Yeah, that's totally understood.
We have to move Shelob to Return of the King,
Which makes sense because the time when they were fighting Shelob in the book was also the time when Minas Tirith was also getting attacked as well too.
Right. So we had to move things,
Yeah,
because like the books were going back and forth. But I just like I like middles of trilogies. I like where you end with more more cliffhangers. You end with more kind of uncertainty. You had a big battle.
Oh, Helm's Deep was amazing. It was amazing.
Beautifully shot. And Helm's Deep is a great thing, but like Helm's Deep in the sense of the story is like, great, you won something, but like you're nowhere near where you need to be.
Yeah.
And to me, I guess that for me, I think that it just speaks to me. I love Fellowship.
Yeah.
I thought that's why I just wanted to come talk shit about Return.
So and this is what I said on last week's episode with Guardian Project podcast. There's two big sins of the Two Towers that to me, to this day, are unforgivable. And this is coming from a Tolkien purist, all right, that I've read the books, I've read, and I will admit I have not read the like Children of Hurin, The Fall of Gondolin, and Beren and Luthien, those books that Christopher Tolkien
like took from his
I still haven't read those, but I've read everything else: Unfinished Tales, Silmarillion, most of the history of Middle Earth, where it's just sort of like old stuff from J.R.R. Tolkien's sort of like revisions of but so the two biggest sins I feel of Two Towers is Aragorn's death, and Faramir. Those are the two biggest sins for me.
So with Faramir, are you talking about the fact that Faramir like seems to have a moment where he's actually gonna like he actually is considering the ring?
He takes the ring, and then he also takes Frodo and Sam to Osgiliath, which still pisses me off to this day.
And I did not like that either, and I will fully support that. I did not like that. That was one of the things that did anger me, because it was more like they needed time. They needed something. The hard part with Two Towers in a movie form was they needed something for Sam and Frodo to be doing.
Yeah, because if you don't have Shelob, there's really not much else that happens.
Nothing. And like the problem was it did go against Faramir as a character, so I can totally get that.
And it still pisses me off because I love the quote. If it laid on the side of the road, I would not pick it up. To show, and I get from a movie perspective, you want to show the One Ring can corrupt anybody, right?
But like Faramir is like,
Book Faramir is supposed to be the complete opposite of Boromir, but no, they wanted to be like he has daddy issues instead. I'm like, what the fuck?
Okay, I can buy that. It's still not the worst. Return of the King is still the worst.
So, well, and also, what about Aragorn's death? I get they had to shoehorn in Arwen with it, but that death scene, I absolutely fucking hate it.
It makes no sense.
It doesn't. It's like...
It is pointless. It's pointless. I mean, you're already looking at movies that they could have cut scenes and we would have been okay with.
Yeah, like, don't be wrong. It's like, I can never watch the theatrical editions ever again. In my mind, they don't exist anymore. It's just the extended editions.
I only have the extended edition.
Yeah. I've actually, I want to show you something. Hold on real quick.
Yep.
I showed this to, no, it was some other podcast I did. I can't remember. Hold on. No, here it is. So, I'm just grabbing some stuff here real quick. If you want to just like talk into the mic as I'm grabbing this stuff to fill up the dead air.
To fill up the dead air.
I can't hear you, but... So, and I think I did this on another episode, but just to show, for people watching the video, I've got the Hobbit cartoon, the Lord of the Rings cartoon, absolute trash, complete trash.
I have thoughts there.
Yeah, and then the Return of the King cartoon, complete trash.
Well,
it's so bad.
The Hobbit cartoon is amazing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the Hobbit cartoon's great.
The Lord of the Rings cartoon
is so bad.
It's trash because they ran out of a budget. And
I know.
Like ends at Helm's Deep.
Right.
But like, there's some really cool stuff where they use like the
rotoscoping.
Yeah, and they have like the images behind.
Yeah.
Some cool like
70s style. Yeah. But they couldn't even get Saruman's name right because they called him Aruman because they didn't want to get it confused with Sauron. But they still call him Saruman.
Well, then the best part is it ends, and then you get picked up by Rankin and Bass.
Yeah.
To do Return of the King, which is just like the complete opposite style. You get this really gritty like half of Lord of the Rings.
And Return of the King is
then, like,
complete trash.
Return of the King is like the campy, like happy-go-lucky Hobbit style animation. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
okay. I'm impressed you have.
No, so I just had to show the original DVD Lord of the Rings.
That's what I have.
And then I haven't picked up the 4K set yet, but I have the Blu-rays of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings as well too.
See, and I need a Blu-ray. I do want a Blu-ray set. I only have I have those same extended edition boxes that you have for the DVD.
Oh, I love them. But so Return of the King. Tell me what about Return of the King that you did not like? I mean, I know that there's one big thing that I still hate to this day, and then I wish Peter Jackson never made the freaking decision for.
So there's a couple of things. And some is like, once again, the thing that bothers me the most is something that it may not have worked in movie form, but it is the return to the Shire. We do not get the Hobbit and having the raising of the Shire, that we see the full influence of what Saruman was doing. And like, he's already dead at this point in this version versus like them.
Yeah, in the books, it's I freaking love that part of the book, the scouring of the Shire.
And it's really important because it shows how these hobbits don't fit in some ways into the world that they return to.
Mm-hmm.
They have to return to this world. I mean, and we get this whole thing of like reintegration. Now, the second part about that is the fact is the book ended with that because Return of the King, in some ways, the king is about more of Frodo than it is about Aragorn. And the framework for the whole Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit is the hobbits.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, it's this specific race that didn't really travel, that like
barely fit into the grand scope of Middle Earth, and
things, and they're the ones who are like the only ones that are able to basically not be fully corrupted by the ring to be able to get to that point. To the point that still like they're more powerful than like men, elves, anything from the corruption standpoint. And then Return of the King is about their journey. The movies, because they are movies, but this is why I didn't like Return of the King, and where it fails me is the emphasis is on the humans, the elves, and the dwarves. I mean, the dwarf, but it's the focus is really not on the hobbits. Even then, they're background players in some ways, even though that they do the stuff and they're there. It is really the story of men, and that is not what Lord of the Rings is for me. And so that is like the reason that movie, I like it. I liked all the movies. I enjoy all the movies. I will watch them all the time. But it hurt the most because it basically took agency away from the hobbits and their story.
Yeah, and it took away that, and like I said, I get from a movie standpoint that, you know, Vigo or Aragorn, I mean, was, you know, a main character, but I feel like you say, it definitely takes away from Frodo and Sam's heroics. And not that they don't showcase them, it's just they, like you said, they feel very background character, and that the scouring of the Shire really shows that not only have the three other hobbits, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, have grown and are able to lead the hobbits into defeating Saruman, but also shows the horrors of war, and that's why Frodo is so passive. Like, I don't want anybody to die. You know, we can't kill anybody. You know,
no.
Let's just talk it out. Yeah,
like, he's background. Like, he's the hero, the one whose stories will be told about. Frodo of the Nine Fingers.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to the scouring of the Shire, he is background, and that is very powerful. Now, doing that in movie, I don't know if it would have worked. The fact that it wasn't done.
I don't think it would have worked because it's and watching a lot of the behind the scenes of like all the Lord of the Rings movies, Peter Jackson really explained it very well, and I totally understand. As much as I want to see it, it's because of the emotional highs that you have in the movie. You get the one ring is destroyed, right? You know, and that by that time, theatrical edition, it's like 2.5 hours, because you still have a half hour of, you know, the coronation, the Grey Haven, you know, the hobbits returning to the Shire, the Grey Havens, and all that. adding the Scouring of the Shire would have added at least another 15 to 30 minutes of the movie, and by then it would not have tested well with audiences because it would have just for people like us, I wouldn't have cared, you know. But
well, this is where we've grown. I mean, what's interesting having this whole discussion is this looks very different in a world where we have miniseries and versus this. This was the first. In some ways, this is kind of the first time we actually got something that was this ambitious that could be spread out across what we did get, like 9 hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
Filmed concurrently across 9 hours.
Yeah. If you just consider the theatrical editions, just 9 hours.
Yeah, but like, you're not. This is something that plays better now if we had a series, right? And I mean,
would it though nowadays? Would it? Well, think about it. So, because
there's the problem.
How much sex would be in it now? You know, like how many elf boobies would be shown? You know?
there is the kind of the thing.
I mean, Game of Thrones is a good example. It's.
Well, see, and I was gonna say it's not a good analog, and that's just because it's not finished, and they really didn't have a.
Yeah, I know.
Versus
fucking George R. Martin, motherfucker.
where like Lord of the Rings was gonna go, but I mean, yes, I mean, I do think.
Because like that whole, what was it? Amazon's doing a Lord of the Rings series about the Second Age or whatever. I'm not looking forward to that at all because I'm afraid they're gonna try to Game of Thrones it into something sexual, and I'm like, that's not Middle Earth. That's none of Tolkien's work at all is sexual in any nature. It's supposed to be like pure high, you know, rated PG fantasy type stuff.
Well, and it's supposed to be quote unquote metaphor for World War I.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that. Yeah.
And I know war is not, you know, light and all that. It has some very dark tones, but as far as like the sexual nature of it, which you know they're probably going to try to add or something, it's like, no, we don't need any of that.
We tried to add it to The Hobbit. I mean,
oh yeah, with
Evangeline Lilly and.
Well, I wouldn't really consider that sexual in nature. It'd be more of a love story.
I guess more love story.
Yeah.
Like it needed, like they wanted to add a romance element.
Yeah.
More than anything. But yeah. Now I have to ask you, what is your number one sin from Return of the King?
Oh, Frodo telling Sam to go home. I absolutely, I feel like, to me, it does not make sense. It should have never happened because the way it happened in the book makes perfect sense for both Frodo and Sam to enter Shelob's lair together, and then they get split up. Yeah. You know, because Gollum is fighting off Sam, and then while Frodo is running away from Shelob, there is no reason at all for Sam to start climbing down the mountain. Oh no, I'm gonna go back. It's like you could have had the same exact effect where Sam shows up at the last second there, because you could have shown Sam look like he almost got killed by Gollum, right?
Right. Yeah, and I agree with that too. So yeah.
That to me, I can never forgive Peter Jackson for that.
And the thing that, you know, like, once again, things that wouldn't have tested well but was a shame to lose was I'm still whatever year this is, 20 something years later.
Oh God.
I still want Tom Bombadil.
Oh, you know, Coyle was saying that, and as much as I love Tom Bombadil, it would be horrible pacing. Horrible pacing.
That's the thing, and that's why I do, and I respect Peter Jackson a lot.
Yeah,
I really do. I mean, they gave the reins of something like that to somebody who was a B horror movie director.
Yeah,
and I actually have whole theories about why that works. Because him and then Sam Raimi doing Spider-Man 1 and 2 was in some ways was just really, really smart. I think that they gave the material what it needed. But just I understand from a filmmaking perspective completely, and it's just one of those things that Tom Bombadil is just an awesome character that would not have played on screen.
You know,
and I can say that.
Yeah, it's I love him in the books. There was an essay that I remember reading. It's back when the internet, actually had websites instead of just Reddit, Twitter, and Facebook and YouTube.
Oh, and Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon. So because I used to go to a lot of, like, that was one thing I loved with Lord of the Rings movies come out. There were so many Lord of the Rings fan sites and all that stuff. Oh, yeah. Not just the OneRing.net, but there was a bunch of them that popped up. There was a essay that I remember reading about Tom Bombadil that it could almost make perfect sense with because there was always a mystery of who Tom Bombadil and Goldberry or Goldmoon. Oh God, Goldberry, Goldmoon's from Dragonlance. Yeah, it's Goldberry, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've been reading up on Dragonlance lately since there's new books coming out. So about who Tom Bombadil and Goldberry were, and this. I don't even know if the essay even exists anymore, but they say it could have been Aul, or the smith who basically created the dwarves, and Yavanna, the nature Vala as well too, and just like all the description in the essay, it kind of makes perfect sense because Tom Bombadil, like I said, we'll never find out what he is, but he's got to be a Vala or something of some kind, because if the ring has no effect on him,
zero effect. He's just like,
yeah, it's like he's got to be a Vala or something else. Like he just doesn't give a shit about it. And I love how in the book they're like, well, why can't we just give it to Tom Bombadil? Gandalf's like, I mean, we could, but he just forget about it.
Right. Like, it just wouldn't. Yeah, like it would probably get rediscovered at some point.
Yeah.
Like that's what we're trying to. Didn't work last time we did that.
Right.
So I could accept fellowship, but I was really afraid that you were saying Return of the King.
No, I mean, like Return of the King has some great moments. Like, I mean, of course, the Charge of the Rohirrim, fucking amazing. That part. Climbing up Mount Doom, still one of my favorite scenes of it all, and just
going through the caves.
Yeah.
Bringing back like the sword that was unmade, and I mean, I do love that.
Yeah. The God, I still can't believe it took him 3 movies to finally get Narsil rebuilt and all that shit. It's like, he should have had it from the beginning. Come on. That was another thing that annoyed me. Like, Aragorn's like, I don't know if I want to be king. Bitch, yeah, you do. Shut up. He knew as soon as he met Frodo. It's like, yeah, I'm going to be king, motherfuckers. I mean, I get it from, like I said, I get it from a movie perspective and all that, because
once again, yeah.
It's just little frustrations like that annoy me, and they I don't know. Oh, so what did you think of the Hobbit trilogy? Now that's some real controversial shit right there, because I just recently rewatched it too.
So, what can I say that is nice? I really liked Sylvester McCoy's presentation of
Radagast. Yeah.
Yeah. He like is a perfect Radagast.
But I mean, okay, so I agree with that, but
we didn't need 3 movies.
Well, did we also really need bird shit in his hair? Did he really have to have bird shit in his hair? Like, seriously?
That worked for me. That completely worked. I mean, part of it is because I'm just like, I do a weird headcanon where he's actually Doctor. He's actually his version of Doctor. And I will tell you, that man gives one of the most fantastic panels ever. I've seen him do.
I've never actually seen him before.
Oh yeah. I saw him at a Doctor Who con, which was the first place I ever met Gavin Verhey.
Oh dang.
This once again, I'm gonna say 2012 or 13, on my Twitter, on my phone, tweeting about being at this Doctor Who con, and then I see a Gavin Verhey tweet about being at Doctor Who con, and I literally do this and go.
And there he is.
that cosplayer that looks like David Tennant is Gavin. But it was at Sylvester McCoy's panel.
That's awesome.
Fantastic panel.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, I
just couldn't get through 3 movies before it just was too much for me.
Now, like I said, I'm a purist, But
Yep.
I do enjoy the Hobbit movies, but I have to turn my brain off. I have to like not nitpick them at all like crazy, because if I did, then I'd never ever enjoy them. But because there are enjoyable parts of the movies. I love Martin Freeman's Bilbo. Like, he does such a good job as Bilbo.
He is a great villain.
And I love how they gave each dwarf a personality, because in the book it was really only like Thorin and Balin were like the only ones who even had Thorin more, and Balin a little bit had a personality, but it was really just those two at the most had personalities in the original book. And I love
You get Gandalf getting to like visit the necromancer before he's figured out that it is Sauron. Like, that's cool to bring that piece in.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't mind bringing that in. It was bringing in like I said, the love story with Evangeline Lilly that just.
I personally love it. I love it. I love it. I love it.
I like Evangeline Lilly. I think she's a fantastic person. Like, I love her in Ant-Man. I loved her in Lost.
I mean, like, I personally love the little.
I didn't like the story.
I loved it. I love the storyline. I'm guilty of it. I mean, like you said, it's so bad. I totally understand, but it's like, it's a guilty pleasure. It makes me cry every single time.
Benedict Cumberbatch is a fine voice for Smaug once again.
Oh my god, fucking Smaug! He's
a great looking Smaug.
Oh yeah.
Like the scenes between him and Bilbo worked.
Yeah, that scene was awesome. It was
different movies.
That whole battle between the dwarves and Smaug, I understand why it had to happen, because from a movie, it would be really boring for two movies for the dwarves to travel all this way to Lonely Mountain to be like, oh, well, we're not going to fight Smaug, you know? Because, I mean, that's what happens in the books. It's Bilbo goes, stirs up Smaug, gets him pissed off, and he flies out. And the dwarves are trapped in the little hallway, and they're like, I guess we die.
And so, like I said, it's like those things. There's moments, once again. Like, I love Gandalf. We get a little bit more because he kind of just disappears for
yeah.
in The Hobbit. So I like that we get him with the Necromancer. I love
Luke Evans as Bard. Oh, the Riddles in the Dark was amazing.
Riddles in the Dark. Fantastic.
Oh my god, it was friggin' amazing.
And like I said,
I love Bard. I love Luke Evans as Bard. I thought he did a great job, because it actually gave personality to Bard, where he was just a no-name person. Though, what was it, Alfred and the Master of the Town, I could have done completely without.
And like, beyond that, like, I like, it literally is just, you know, it's like probably just half scenes with Martin Freeman and somebody else, and I'm probably good to go. But like, Martin Freeman is played like many of my favorite like literary characters. So, I mean, he plays Doc Watson.
Mm-hmm.
So he plays Watson. He plays Arthur Dent.
Arthur Dent. Wait, who's Arthur Dent again?
Hitchhiker's Guide to the
Oh, you know, I haven't seen that.
So the movie is like very trippy.
Yeah,
all the media is, because each version's different.
Yeah, I've never seen the movie. Never seen the show.
Most Deaf is okay. Then Martin Freeman plays Arthur Dent, and Arthur Dent is the everyman. If you've never read the book.
Yeah, I've never read it.
He's the everyman. He's just like stereotypical British everyman, and like that's Martin Freeman. So like, he's literally played some of my favorite people. Like, I will watch Martin Freeman in.
I love him in The Office.
Oh yeah, and then these are the original. Yeah.
No, but yeah, it's like I've got a little guilty pleasure of the Hobbit movies. Said I know they're absolutely terrible, but it's just, for me, it's more Middle Earth visually, and I'm sorry.
And musically.
Oh yeah, musically. Like, I love the death scene of Thorin when Bilbo goes sees Thorin and all that, dying and all that. Like, that to me was like perfect. Like almost straight out of the book, like how it felt, you know. Because like every time I read The Hobbit, like that part still chokes me up. and all that stuff. Like, you know, if more people valued food and cheer above hoarded gold, you know, it'd be a merrier world after all. And, you know, it's like, you know, fuck, man, it should be like that more, you know?
I think it's where like I said, I think where I struggle is The Hobbit.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Lord of the Rings.
100%. I totally understand. Well, a lot of that was because of the studios where Peter Jackson
I know, they
wanted to do 2 movies, and that was it. And
yes, and that's the nature of. And
what's funny is that Peter Jackson didn't even get enough time to like do pre-production of The Hobbit because Guillermo del Toro. Yeah, I can never say it. Like dropped out, so then it's like, oh shit, well I guess I have to do it now because Peter Jackson was originally just supposed to be like an executive producer.
Yep.
And I think part writer or something like that, and
I think he was involved with the scripts and stuff. I mean, he was involved heavily. But
he didn't want to direct it though. But then when Del Toro dropped out, Jackson and I think he didn't have a lot of time for pre-production either, so he had to rush a lot of stuff, and you can tell that too. You can tell a lot of stuff was rushed, and it didn't have the same love.
It's still okay to like it.
Yeah.
It's still okay to like it.
Oh, I mean, it's fine. I like it. It's just, I mean, like I said, I have to turn my brain off though, like when watching them, because it's like, oh God, none of this happens. Like none of it. But it's just nice to see, you know, Middle Earth more, and now we're getting an Amazon TV show, and I'm not looking forward to that. I almost kind of want to be like, just leave it alone, please. We got the movies, leave it alone. But, you know, people love money, so...
And you'll probably still end up at least watching parts of it.
Probably. Yeah, I know.
I probably will.
I know, and I'm probably going to hate watch it. Like, if they got this wrong, I'm probably going to be so, like, picky on it. Like, because I think they said they want to do Second Age of Numenor, and, like, how, what the Kings of Numenor tried to go, like, basically defeat heaven, like, the forces of heaven, of Valinor, and all that. And then the gods are all like, nope, LOLs, we're going to sink your shit, bro. Good game. Get good, scrub.
Nice draft deck. We brought vintage.
Oh my God. Fucking speaking of Magic players, that is always one of the things that annoys me the most when you're drafting, and especially when you have someone new in the pod too. Like you always get the one asshole be like, oh, who didn't draft this card? Like, how is this still in the pack? Like, shut the fuck up. No one...
Yeah, like, just pass it.
Yeah.
Take it and pass it. Be excited.
Yeah, right? Right? Yeah. Like, there's been times where I know I've had that happen to me, like, right next to me. Like, I remember drafting cons one time, and I didn't draft the fetch land in the pack because that wouldn't have helped me win the game, you know? And then have someone like, oh my God, who passed the fetch land? I'm like, it was a Windswept Heath. At the time, it was worth like $5. Okay.
Yeah, like cool.
Take it. I don't care.
Be excited about it.
Oh God, I can't stand those kind of Magic players. Jesus, man. And that's another thing. It's like, just like I said, I've only listened to a few episodes of Goblin Lore Podcast. I haven't listened to all of them, but have you ever done an episode of like just toxic ass LGS players and like how much some of them just suck?
We haven't done specifically. We did do toxic masculinity.
I think I remember listening to that episode. Yeah.
So that, you know, like Jace is kind of the problem.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, I remember that.
But like, so like some we've gotten into. Yeah, it just hasn't been a topic that we're just kind of like.
Oh, we need to discuss. Well, I mean, with the pandemic now, it's not like there's much.
Like our favorite so far is the fact that we had Chase on to discuss social anxiety.
Yeah.
And how to improve social anxiety by going to events and not avoiding, and to open yourself up to maybe trying out these new experiences. And the episode literally dropped 2 weeks into the pandemic.
Oh, damn. Yeah, I had her on my show too. We discussed something similar, because the thing that attracted me to her to want to bring her on, because I don't know if she still does the articles now, but she used to do a bunch of mental health articles on one of the websites. I can't remember which one. And that's what wanted me to. I prompted her to get her on the show. And I loved them. And that makes a good point about social anxiety because, and I think this is probably true of a lot of people, is I get so excited to go to like Magic Fest and all that stuff. And I feel like, I try to go all 3 days, right? And it's like, I feel every single time I feel like I expend all my social energy on the first day. And then like when Saturday comes, I'm like, fuck, I don't want to talk to anybody now. Just leave me alone.
Yeah, just that idea. We talk a lot about this concept of like the extroverted introvert.
Yeah.
Which is this the people who probably skew more towards that introversion side, but really do enjoy going to things. But it's like you need that time. Alex talks a lot about this, like him like going to like more of like a convention and having that place where he like goes back to the room and takes a nap, or goes back to the room for a couple of hours and just like
it's a good idea.
Shuts down for a couple of hours before going back to the floor, because otherwise it's like you said, you go that day 1 10 hours, then you go day 2, and then you hit Sunday and you're just like,
I want nothing to do with any of you. Right?
I hate people, like, yeah. And so and Chase is basically the third host of the show at this point. I mean, the joke is that she's unofficially the third host. So
and she's I had her on, let's say 2019 was when I had her on some point, and like got last year. She's like blown up like crazy now.
Her content is just commander content. She knows the format. She builds exciting and like interesting decks, and then just like with her stream, she's just so engaging.
And I wish I had the time to do that shit sometimes. It's like,
I know.
It's like, because I have so much content I want to make for Magic, but I'm also at the same time working on making some RPG content.
Oh, wow.
Because I'm actually actively working on a script for a D&D episode that I'm doing. And the topic is, because I'm one of those forever DMs, right? I do play as a player in games, but I love DMing more because I love telling the stories and all that stuff. And the topic for the episode is, should you as a DM TPK, team party kill, like kill everybody? Because, I've had a lot of single character deaths, but I've had a few points where came close to almost everybody dying, and it's like, and I feel like as a DM you have to ask yourself, do you, depending on how far along you are in the campaign, should you and do you want to kill your whole party, right? And how would that affect the players as well, and you because I feel like as a DM you want to see your players succeed, but you also want to make it challenging. Like, I feel like a team party kill at session 1 when everybody's level 1 doesn't feel as bad as compared to when they're like level 15, level 16, and they've been playing this campaign for 2 years and they're all about to die. And you're like, oh, fuck, I don't even want to play the game anymore, So I'm really exploring that idea right now for, as a DM, what should you do and how should you react and all that kind of stuff. I always
think that's one of those things that's very interesting, because it gets into, this could be very impactful, but what are the ramifications?
Yeah.
And so one of those, maybe it's not this is never done. What are the situations where it would be done, and what thought went into it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fascinating concept. And
I'm excited to explore that idea. Like, I've got so many ideas written down. The other episode I'm working on is, my group is, we were originally gonna do play Pathfinder last week for the first time, and but then my house flooded and all that stuff, and I've been dealing with that shit. It's been a year. Yeah. So we're gonna try it again this Friday. We're gonna play Pathfinder 2nd edition, and it's been something I've been so excited to try out with them. And I want to do an episode of what it's like, the transition from D&D 5th edition to Pathfinder 2nd edition, to really, like, if you're interested and want to do it, what are some of the things you're gonna come across, right? Because they're very similar systems, but also very different at the same time.
I really like it, like kind of bringing this full circle from what we were talking about early on, which is like the lessons of doing a podcast. Now that we're 2.5 years into the Goblin Lore, that made me think about this is like I've had to be very selective about my content and like what I'm able to do and not do, and I do find that is still just such a stressful thing because there's so much content I want to do.
Oh yeah,
could do, and I've had to work on that balance, and I do.
Oh my gosh, yes, it is that. Oh man, I got some stuff to tell you about that. It's tough.
Right. It is, and my ability to actually be able to say no, which is something that I think I'm benefited by being 40 now, and I'm actually at a point where I feel comfortable and more able to easily say no, or to like tell people if I need to have a break or I need to reschedule and something. It's still hard because there's still so much that I like want to do and I get very excited about, and then there's just not enough time.
Oh yeah, and then it's the FOMO too. The fear of missing out is so big because, and this is a good segue into content creation where, and I've seen Chase express this before, and I see a lot of content creators express this where, you feel like you're not good enough or you're not making it, quote unquote. And, and that it's very rare, I've gone through that, and I almost thought about quitting almost 2 years ago now, with it. And I'm glad I didn't. But it's a very real situation where if you feel like, and maybe this is just life in general, because I am of the type of person where if I'm not doing something, I don't feel like I'm being productive. And that's something I'm working on, that it's okay to relax and play video games for a couple hours, as long as it's not impacting my ability to still live my life and provide for my family and all that stuff, But there's times where it's hard because it's like, I'm sitting there playing Animal Crossing and I'm like, I could be working on my podcast instead, or I could be streaming instead to build up my brand. And, have you had to deal with that before, and especially with podcasting or just content?
This is where I do think that I've had the benefit of, like, this is where I joke, like, being one of the old men of Magic, old people of Magic now, is that, like, if I was making content creation in my 20s or even my 30s, probably in my 40s, it's a lot easier for me than it used to be, because at this point, I get my time to do this. The podcast I've devoted myself to. I am able to get in a game every now and then on webcam Magic. I enjoy playing it. I'm excited that I've been able to do as much as I have, but like, I also have a 2-year-old daughter and a wife. We've only been married for 3 years. I mean, because we're older. So it helps combat some of that. And I think, it helps me to be a little bit more comfortable with the idea that, like, the coulds and the shoulds are not as bad as they used to be for me.
I don't know, and
because there used to be, like, if I don't do this, then I'm not going to get this option.
I'm not going to get a preview card or, whatever the...
Yeah.
No. And I totally know what you mean. And, you speaking of having a younger daughter, you said 3-year-old, right? Or 2-year-old? Two. And it's gotten me thinking that as my kids are getting older, like, I'm going to have an 18-year-old this year. I'm only 30. Fuck, how old am I? I'm going to be 35 this year. And I'm gonna have an 18-year-old this year, and then my youngest is gonna be 12 this year. So, and it's getting to a point where they're getting a lot more independent, and they're also daddy's not cool enough to hang out with too. It's like, so I feel like I have a lot more time. I do try and spend time with them. Like my oldest daughter, we do D&D at least every other week. I've tried to get them both into Magic, but they're not competitive at all. Like, they know how to play, they just don't, but they love role playing though. So I'm glad I can do that with them. And then my youngest I'll just try to I don't know, spend time, like play a game with her or something. But it's maybe Is this your first child?
Yeah. So I'm like my parents were 18 and 21 when they got married.
Mm-hmm.
I was born less than 9 months later. So that's what I grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up with like young parents. I grew up with like kind of thinking that was the expectation, and then I had my first kid at 39. So I'm kind of I ended up going to college. I ended up going into grad school. Ended up not really like just pursuing that. And my wife is a physician, and she went a similar route. So
No, nothing wrong with that.
she's younger than
Yeah.
me by a couple of years, but yeah, but still, I mean, we're older parents.
Yeah.
anyways, which is an interesting thing.
Yeah, there's things that you know, being a young parent and all that, it's definitely tough. You don't know everything, and like I said, I'm not saying it's got to be easier when you're older, because I think every kid is different, and you just I will say, like, I remember, like, when my daughter was a baby, like, when we got the routine down with her when she was a baby, it's like, okay, it's easy, right? You know, this isn't too hard. But then when she starts walking and talking, you're just like, oh, shit.
Yeah, that's we're like literally in the throes of getting ready to hit 2. And,
Oh, man.
you know,
It doesn't get easier, man. It doesn't. It doesn't.
But but it does make me like kind of feel like, man, I really wish in some ways that I had the energy that I had when I was 22.
Yeah.
To keep up with
It's
a 2-year-old.
Man, and then when they're teenagers and they hate you, it's like it doesn't get any easier.
I'll most likely be in a home by then, so we're fine.
Hey. just hopefully she loves you enough to be able to take care of you. All right. And then, you know, you wear your adult diapers and be like, psh, payback now. You get to change me. God, I hope I never have to do that. That would suck. Man. But oh shit, what were we talking about before? The whole kid shit. Content creation. Yeah, like the FOMO and all that stuff. Yeah, man, and like I said, maybe it won't happen as much. Like, I've gotten better at managing the expectation of it. It's like, it's still there, you know, because obviously, you know, when you live on Twitter, and it's that fucking poison of social media where you see everybody happy and succeeding, and you're just like, oh shit, I'm not doing anything and all that stuff. And I can't imagine like what my kids are going through with that. And I have to tell them, I have to remind them, like, a lot of what you see is not real. They're just, you know, faking being happy, or not faking, but, you know, they're just showing the happy moments. They're not showing everything. But
yeah, it's impression man.
Yeah. And it's still like, dude, even at my age, it's like, it's hard sometimes because that's all you see. You just get bombarded by everybody's happy. And you're just like, well, shit, I'm not happy. You know,
Everybody's cool thing.
Yeah, right.
They got to do, and well, I didn't get to do a cool thing.
Yeah. It's tough. It's tough. It's and I feel like with just content creation in general, it's for the people that just, and I don't know, because it's easy to say, like, when people suddenly make it big quickly, you know, what did it take for them to get there at that point? You know, and then, you know, how much, and I think a lot of people don't see a lot of the work behind the scenes as well too that happens.
Yeah, they don't. Most of the time when I see people say that, they don't realize the articles that they were writing for 5 years that nobody was reading, or the fact that they just weren't on Twitter but they were on other platforms. And
Yeah.
it looks like that it's this like quick rise, and you know, and it leads to a discounting of people's work. You know, I could sit here and be like, well, you know, I've been on Twitter for 10 years. Like I said, it's not like I made any attempts I wasn't doing content creation up until a year or so ago. You know, it's you know, like people, I think, sometimes get that are like, well, I've been around for this long. And it's like, well, yes. And, you know, like, I understand. I was around. I wasn't doing the work.
Yeah.
You got people that are doing the work, and it may look different to you. It may look like this, like, out of nowhere, and it's And we'll be honest, it's used mainly for, women creators and creators of color that people don't think are deserving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In our community still. That, they got there for other reasons. And,
yeah. To discount what they're doing. I just thought of a question, I guess, for you as a psychologist, right? When
I can't give you the good drug.
Oh, damn. No,
that's how you remember the difference.
Well, damn, I was going to ask about that. No,
I know.
So I've got a question for you about content creation. So as content creation is becoming a viable means of living, and it always depends on where you are, what country you are, what state, city, and all that.
There's a lot of factors.
How do you see that being a healthy choice for a career as it is becoming viable? And maybe it also depends on what kind of content creator. Like there's streamers, YouTubers, podcasters, and they all have different workloads per se. But how do you feel about the rise of that happening and the potential mental health toll it can take on people as well?
This is one of those, it's so new that I don't think we fully know. I really just don't think that I don't. I mean, just in my line,
okay.
What I like my specialty areas and stuff. This is not something that I really know. I worry with a lot of the stuff to do with impression management and kind of some of the concepts of things like the parasocial relationships that we're kind of seeing more and more being finally discussed about this idea that what people expect, and if you know them online, you know them in person, and what that can do to somebody's mental health. My concern becomes where people don't know what it takes to be able to be successful, and we don't know what the long-term success looks like. Even then, our most successful YouTubers have still not have been around for a long enough a career. And something like Magic, you're not going to be getting rich quick and retiring. And
yeah,
I don't know what years and years of that looks like yet. And I would want somebody to be very clear about understanding what they do and don't know about something before they would pursue a career like this.
Makes sense. Yeah, because I think about you make a good point. Even some of the biggest YouTubers out there, biggest streamers, was it PewDiePie, Mr. Beast, Markiplier? I'm just naming off some names. Those are just the biggest ones. Ninja is a big streamer too.
Yeah.
Was it Dr. Disrespect or something? I don't know. And I'm sure there's other bigger ones too that I just don't know about. And just from what you can understand or even sort of glean from Social Blade or anything like that, they're making really good money what they're doing. But like you said, what are the long-term consequences of that? And obviously for people who make it big like that, hopefully, you can assume they're being pretty smart with their money, and all that stuff. But no, so I guess for people that are more, maybe the question would be
Magic, what the viability of it actually.
Yeah, the viability for middle of the tier content creators who can live off this, say Professor, for example, right? You can safely assume that one, we know he's not as big as say the Logan Paul brothers or whatever, or Logan and Jake Paul, because and he's not as big as a lot of the big name streamers and all that stuff, but we know that he does this full time, and he's been doing it full time 3-4 years, something like that, all that stuff. And that would be almost a good case study to understand how long can you keep that up for? How viable is it? And
well, and this is one of those me not knowing enough about that situation.
Yeah.
Where did he start? Where did he start from? Did he already have capital in a place where he could set up to be able to run the type of production that he runs, versus coming at this from you having to build your career from like the ground up, and you don't have, and I don't know.
And I guess I bring this up because it's something that I see all too common, just relating this to Magic, where you see so many people like, I want to make it big in YouTube or podcasting or streaming and all that stuff. And then,
it used to be the Pro Tour. That was the idea behind it.
Yeah.
That's what people thought.
And it's, I don't know. And it's something that I see in, younger kids as well too, like kids that kids that are my kids' age, all that stuff, wanting to be YouTubers and stuff like that. And I feel like there's not enough information out there to really talk about the risks of trying to do that and not trying to pursue something that is going to benefit them in the longer run. Like there are people that just extremely lucky, right? And just can strike it rich right out of the box. But that's not everybody. That's like the 1%, right?
It's like the lottery.
Yeah.
It's people will do it. It could take a lot of work too. And I think that, I think that this is where I think of some of the people that you even mentioned. I think of this as like the whole idea of influencers, right? It's kind of like the the Jenners that are worth $1 billion. Well, they didn't start at zero. The Paul brothers were like
Disney actors or something. Yeah.
Right. Like they already came and had wealth to them. So it's a culture thing that I still struggle with. Just understanding kind of like the long-term benefits or mental health effects that might have.
And I think it will be an interesting culture shift as people start doing it more and can make a living off it. And it also, I guess maybe from a perspective as a parent that worries me is, it's just like my mom used to say, oh, you waste your time playing video games and all that stuff. But there is a viable way to make money off it now. But, what kind of focus should you put on that versus other things, right? It's like, I don't know. It's so tough because so much of it depends on your situation. Obviously, like if you're able to do it and make a run for it, awesome, great. But it's like, I feel like I see too many people who just like, they think that's their meal ticket. And it's like, no, it's not. You need to, for lack of better words, get a job, essentially, and not saying you should give that up or anything. It's just, I don't know where I'm going. I feel like I'm just rambling on and on with it.
I think it's because it is a tough question, like thinking of this as,
and it's so new too.
A few more years away than having to really deal with this than you.
Yeah.
But like thinking about like, with a kid coming up versus, I got a very consistent message of what was kind of like, the expectation is I was going to school and everything else.
I've told my oldest, as long as she's working or going to school, she's going to stay here as long as she wants. It's like, I'm never going to charge her rent or anything like that. But she better not just be doing nothing.
And it's a hard, I think that.
And like, I think there's just so much pressure on social media, just the internet in general, where, it makes this impression where you can make so much money just being an influencer and all that stuff. And it's like, it's not the reality. It's, unless you get lucky and all that stuff.
But hey, if anybody is listening to this and wants to pay me to wear their gear, like, just come find me, because I'll do it.
Yeah,
I'll sell myself out. I'm cool with it.
I guess it depends on the company. Like if it's any like Ultra Pro or like Dragon Shield or whatever, like hell yeah, give me that shit. Yeah.
Okay,
Like my sponsor Card Sphere, like rip this off. Like you want to do what, Ultra Pro? No, I'm joking. Card Sphere, totally joking. Oh man, but no, man, I've had a really good time talking. Unfortunately, like I said, I wish I could keep going with this. Been loving.
This has been great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I've been like really glad that we got a chance to finally record.
Right. The country's still up for now. I mean,
the country is still alive. It's kicking. It's still shitty in a lot.
Oh yeah.
I think that this was a discussion being had today. Like, it's an exhale. It doesn't mean that work is done.
Nope. But
I am going to be hopeful for at least an hour. I don't know. I'm going to want to believe that things can change.
Yeah, it's, and I said something in my Discord because, like, you know, there's people in there that live in California, and I know that's a very Democratic state and all that. Being in Florida, it's very Republican. And a lot of them were saying, like, oh, you know, they're so happy and all that stuff. And I'm not saying I'm not happy that Joe Biden's president, but it's also like kind of like I'm happy, but then it's like, shit, I kind of don't want to say anything because I'm in such a heavy Trump county, and they still believe like freaking the whole insurrection was like some conspiracy cover up, Antifa implant. I'm like, oh my god.
And I think that's the recognition is like things, you know, like it's not like the swearing in is a symbolic thing.
Yeah.
Those people didn't go away. They were there last week.
Oh, I know. And you know, it's interesting. They've always been there too, even before Trump.
Right.
I've been reading Obama's A Promised Land, his memoir of his presidency, and he makes a really good mention. There's a passage in his book when talking about the campaign against McCain and Palin, where he considers like sort of like the spark of the modern day GOP, like the inflammatory rhetoric started with Sarah Palin.
Yeah, the Tea Party.
Yeah, Tea Party and
then it's just it's been fanned.
Yeah, and it kind of like really opened up my eyes, like, holy shit, that makes sense. Like, you forget about that kind of stuff too, because that was, you know, over a decade ago now, and then you think back to now of like, shit, so Donald Trump wasn't the cause of all this. Yeah, he didn't help it, not at all. Mm-mm. But it's been there. He's, like you said, just fanning the flames and making that hotter than ever. So.
And in some ways, too, like, I guess the flip side, you know, and this is one thing that I've been aware of is, for people like me, I've also become more aware of what needs to be done and where the problems are. Not like the problems with the specific, just, you know, insurrectionists, white supremacists, but like with the idea of systematic racism and things that I just had no exposure to. At least I'm aware of them now, and like that's the side that's me that tries to be the hopeful person that I believe I am. Hopefully.
Yeah, no, and I feel like that's been something very important that I've learned a lot as a person in the last year. Because, you know, I've talked with people just understanding, you know, what systemic racism is and institutionalized racism, and understanding what that exactly means, and just the different lived experiences that we have in America as well. Like, as a white person, we have a very different lived experience compared to a black or Spanish or Asian person. And Native American as well, where, you know, you and I, we didn't grow up like that. And what gets me frustrated is the people who say, well, you know, well, I grew up, you know, poor and all this stuff. It's like, I feel like a lot of that, it's like, we're not discounting your personal experience. We're talking about just as a whole, we live in different realities a lot of time.
I think like the best example of it that came to me is like, well, now take the people who were raised in poverty at the same thing and had a different color skin than you, and realize that there even were differential judgments about them.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, I loved it. It was great.
I got to talk about so many of the things I just love talking.
Yeah, no, and like I said, it's for people who've listened to my show. I don't even think we barely talked about magic. Yeah, barely. But this is what happens. Like I said, I love picking your brain for the first hour just about, the military and mental health and all that stuff, because it's something that I'm interested in. I know nothing about it. And that's why I'll ask like a million questions of just, I don't know, just, yeah.
I like this one. We are Magic players.
Yeah.
We just had a conversation.
Yeah. No, I love it. So where can people find you and your content should they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, people want to. I'm at Hobbes Q, or I am at Goblin Lore Pod, and so those are the two places to find me.
Awesome. Where can they find your podcast?
Podbean is our host, our host site, but we're on iTunes, we're on Spotify, we're on most platforms that I am aware of.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you again for coming on. It was great. Had a great time. I'll have to try to get you on to play some EDH on my stream one night.
Hey, I want to, like I said, there's my list of people I want to play with gets longer.
I know it's like every time I get someone on the podcast, it's like, yeah, we got to play EDH and all that stuff. And for the most part, I do my best to try to get them on the stream, but then life gets in the way, and it happens. But we'll try something.
Cool.
But thanks again, man, for coming on, and have a great night.
You too. See you later.
All right.
Hey, everybody. Thank you all for listening to the episode. I hope you all really enjoyed it. I loved it. I could have kept going on, but that's one thing that stinks about recording in the middle of the week, and especially a little bit late at night. It's like, oh crap, I gotta wake up and go to work tomorrow. But nonetheless, I had a great time talking with him, and I hope you all enjoyed it too. And be sure to check out his podcast, Goblin Lore Podcast, as well. He does some really good work there, and it's just great podcast. So thank you all again for listening and watching. Stay cool, be awesome.